All right, and Chair, you are now live.
Thank you, Annie. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 4:02 by my clock. So let's start with our roll call. Liz, I believe I saw you, and can you see the interpreter?
I can, she's just small.
Okay. Samantha,
I like to see all the faces.
okay. Do we have a Samantha here today?
I believe Samantha is not yet with us, Mr. Chair.
All right, okay, let's continue on to Leslie. I believe I saw Leslie. Are you here?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Asia, are you here? Okay, hearing that. Nicole, yes, you are here?
Yep.
No. Rochelle, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Jackie is here, yes. Councillor Russell.
And Councillor Russell is not yet with us either.
Okay, and you said Councillor Digo Gammon will be here maybe later?
She may be joining us later.
Okay, great. So we do have quorum, so let's continue. Have we all seen the minutes of the May meeting? I'm going to assume we have. Any changes do you want to make to these? Or do we have to approve them first? I'm just trying to,
It's Leslie. A motion to approve the minutes.
okay. I require a seconder for that. Do we have one?
Rochelle, I'll second.
Okay, Rochelle and Leslie. Leslie has moved. Rochelle has seconded. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Here we go. The order of business. Have we seen the order of business? Do we have any additions, deletions, or changes to that? Okay, I guess we're good to go. Hearing none, here we are. I need a motion for that. Who would like to move? Excuse me.
I'll move the order of business.
Thank you, Jackie. Seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Nicole. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. Any opposed? Motion carried. We have no business arising from the minutes. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, let's move on. Do we have any deferred business? I believe I don't have any. Annie, do we have any?
No deferred business, Chair.
Great. Okay, correspondence. Yes, we do, from June the 8th. And you circulated that before the meeting?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was correspondence received from the Canadian Women in Growth Partnership, and this was circulated on June 8th.
Excellent. Did any of us attend that session? If you want to talk about it, now is your chance. Okay. Are there any petitions? I didn't see anybody who has attended that. So is there any petitions?
Thank you, Chair. No petitions were received from members through the clerk's office.
Okay. Presentations, I see none. Is that correct?
For this item, yes, no presentations from
No
external.
presentations. And no information items, is that correct as well?
That is correct.
Great. Okay, our first presentation of the meeting, accessible parking guidelines. Victoria and Jeff. I believe I saw Jeff here.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you for coming to address us about parking spaces. I will give you the floor.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah, so good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I'm here. I'm Jeff Nephew. I am the Senior Parking Advisor for HRM Parking Services, and I'm here to talk to you, to present to you our accessible parking design and planning guideline. This has been over 2 years of consultation, research, and design, and I'm very pleased to be able to bring this to you and share it with you today. Next slide, please. So this document was developed in response to the fact that HRM has never had an objective way to evaluate requests for accessible parking. So even though the percentage of Nova Scotians who require accessible parking is growing and is growing at a rate greater than the national average, we've had no way to no list to objectively go down and make sure that as we evaluate these requests for accessible parking, that they're handled consistently and that they're handled using standards and best practices that have been identified both here at HRM and in other jurisdictions. So all of our reviews are discretionary, and what we have as a result of that is that the collection of on-street accessible parking that we have now tends to be a bit of inconsistent and inefficient, and in some cases unsafe offering to the people who rely on these spaces. So this document was developed in response to that, just as a way for us to be able to objectively handle these requests. Next slide, please. We started with engagement. Our first task was to collect information to try and identify what we might be doing well, but more realistically, to identify the gaps in the service that we are providing. So we started a few years ago, 2019. We did some cross-jurisdictional scans to see what other municipalities were doing. In 2018 and again in 2019, we engaged the local accessibility community and some public engagement to be able to collect their feedback as the people who are actually using this service. So through that process, we identified 5 key areas to look at. We want to better be able to mark the spaces so that people can recognize where they are and what they are. To have a better consideration of the requirements for these spaces. So this is in consideration of the different types of vehicles or users that would need them. Also, we want to make sure that there are enough spaces so the people who depend on them can know that they'll have one. To develop a formula for where and how many spaces are developed. So we want to make sure that they're in reasonable proximity to the places that they serve and are safe for users to use. And also to look for good practices, both in design, but also in location and enforcement, to make sure that, as we provide this service, we're providing it in the most efficient way possible. Next slide. So of all of that engagement and research, I'm happy to present to you the results. This is our accessible parking design and planning guideline. And this is the document that we plan to use going forward to be the uniform standard for on-street accessible spaces. within the core area. So this will standardize a review. So regardless of what department or what type of project we're looking at, this will be the basis for the review. This would include requests that we get through 311 from citizens who require a space near their home or near their work. It can be from businesses or institutions that say, our clients are looking for more accessible parking in this area. We can use these guidelines to evaluate those requests. What we can also do as part of new construction or street rehabilitation, as we go through our capital program every year for construction, we can look at all of those projects through this lens and make sure that anywhere there is accessible parking offered, that it's offered up to standard, and anywhere that we may be lacking, we can use those projects as a chance to integrate these standards into our construction. So our primary question is always, it's always safety. Can a driver use the spaces safely? Can a passenger disembark in this location safely? And that's what these guidelines are intended to do. Next slide, please. So to meet that that safety requirement, we've outlined a few things that will make up part of our assessment process. First thing we'll look at is the street context. So is this a residential street where the spaces may only be used by one or two different users? It's in front of somebody's house. So that's, we can design it more specifically, versus something that would be near a busy shopping area or a medical institution where there will be a number of different users with different needs, different vehicles, different equipments. We want to make sure that anything installed in those areas would be A, plentiful enough, and B, designed in a way that it was accessible for the most users. We have to look at the available space to us through our assessment. Halifax is a city with notoriously narrow right-of-ways in some places, especially in the downtown core. So what might be our ideal situation may not be feasible, but we do want to look at making sure that it's as standard as possible, and that as we're adding spaces, that we're looking at the environment around to make sure that it can be used safely, avoiding things like major slopes like we're blessed with in the downtown core, or obstructions like street furniture or trees or things like that, just to make sure it can be, through the assessment, we'll determine the safest location. Next slide, please. So following the assessment, the guideline provides for design. So this will tell us how many spaces are required. So there's a table in the guideline based on the street context and the parking demand throughout the area. How many of those spaces should be designated as accessible spaces so that there's an adequate supply for users who may need them. The guideline provides guidance on how these spaces should be located. So we want them to be able to access the sidewalk, other pedestrian facilities. They should be on level or near level slopes, free of obstructions, to have a safe landing area on the curbside so that people disembarking aren't getting off onto a hill or into we don't want people unloading into a mud puddle. We want a hard surface area. And it also provides guidance for a reasonable distance to the destination served. So unlike off-street accessible parking, where the accessible spot tends to be the first one outside the door, sometimes there are multiple businesses who will share the inventory of accessible spaces. So we want to make sure that they're located in a way that can be a benefit to the entire neighborhood. It also provides some guidance on dimensions, both for parallel to the curb spaces, as well as some angled spaces like the ones they've tried in the Hydrogen area. So we asked the question, really, if we had no barriers to construction, what would we put in? What would the spaces look like? How many would there be? And where would we put? Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides are just a couple of drawings. This is our typical urban street design. This would be a asphalt street with a grass boulevard and a concrete sidewalk. In this case, we put the access aisle behind the vehicle with an access ramp that would allow for the driver to be able to safely move around the back of the vehicle, as well as provide space for anyone with a rear unload. On the passenger side, we have the concrete landing pad, which provide a hard surface for anybody disembarking from the passenger side, whether it be coming out and getting into a wheelchair or even just having a hard surface to be able to push and stand up properly. The concrete pad also provides a landing area for a passenger side mounted lift so that they have a safe place to disembark. We've designed this specifically to be on the right side of the road. There are lots of one-way streets downtown. We wouldn't want to see, wherever possible, we'd like to avoid putting the accessible spaces on the left-hand side of a one-way street, just to prevent passengers from having to unload out into traffic, like that passenger side to be on the curb sides to provide that safety I talked about earlier. Next slide, please. This drawing is kind of our ideal scenario. This is what we would do if space and budget were never a concern. This provides a hard surface access aisle between the vehicle and the curb that the parker could use for loading and unloading. That would be a protected barrier-free area with ramp access to the curb to allow people to load and unload. This has kind of emerged as like the gold standard in on-street accessible parking, and this is what we would choose to adopt in spaces where it's available. The reality is, in a lot of tight spaces and a lot of retrofit situations, we may not have the room for this, but this is what we want to strive for. This is the standard, and as we review all of our spaces, especially in our capital program going forward, any elements of this that we can provide, we are going to. Next slide, please. So this, as I said, was 2 years of research, design, and consultation, but we're not quite done yet. Our next steps are to incorporate feedback into a final version and to adopt these standards as part of our municipal design guidelines, that the red book that's used to govern design decisions as we go through our construction projects. As part of that, we also have planned for starting this summer and continuing through the fall, an audit of our existing inventory of on-street spaces to make sure that that mismatch of spaces that I spoke about earlier isn't going to be in conflict with the guidelines that we set forth in this document. So we'll go through, we'll check all of those and either relocate or rehabilitate however required to bring them up to standard. And also we're going to continue to engage with the provincial government, who are developing their own set of accessibility guidelines. We want to make sure that our guidelines and standards are in step with theirs. One, to make sure they're in agreement with their legislation, but also to make sure that it's a consistent experience for users who may, come to the city for an appointment from another part of the province, that they can expect a consistent experience here that they would see in Truro or Wolfville or Sydney. And next slide. Yeah, so that's all I have to present to you today. I'd be happy to take any questions or hear any feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We will go through our speakers list. Liz, do you have anything to ask or comment on?
So I don't know if I'm like really off topic here or if I'm talking about the right thing. So accessibility parking. is that a pay or is it for free? Like, would you have to pay like at a meter or pay as you go kind of idea, or is it free?
So through the chair to the member, if our on-street accessible parking, anything that's marked with an accessible parking space right now is free for anyone who holds a valid permit. So there's no charge for that.
Okay.
Okay. Leslie, do you have any questions?
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. Do you have designated areas in which these new parking spaces are going to go? We're talking the construction in Spring Garden Road, or are there other locations around HRM that the city is looking at?
Sure, thanks for your question. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, the guidelines that we've set forth are a way to evaluate any requests for parking, typically in the urban core. So our group typically looks at the peninsula and downtown Dartmouth as the areas where there's the most requests for these accessible spaces. But these would apply as part of our Red Book to any projects going forward. So if there was a call for one of these spaces in Bedford or in Middle Musquodoboit or anywhere else that we govern the streets, we will look at it the same way.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could, Victoria Horn, Director of Parking Services, just to answer the committee members' question specifically about Spring Garden. So we are looking at actually a pilot with Spring Garden on all of the side streets. There will be a consistent treatment and placement of all of the accessible parking spaces. And we have worked with the project manager to provide input on the design guidelines associated with those spaces. So potentially throughout the construction, they might not be aligned with this design guideline, but at the end of the project, those will be brought up to whatever the adopted guideline is internally once we go through the Red Book review and adoption by the municipal engineer.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
That was Leslie. Asia, you've joined us. Do you have any questions on what you've heard? Any questions, Asia? I just want to be sure I don't miss anyone. Okay. Nicole, do you have any questions?
I like the both scenarios of the parking spaces. I can visualize the first scenario that you presented. Just wanted to make sure, like, as you implement those, in my experience, sometimes parking on the side of the street, and then there's like a tree in front of the space, or a patch of glass rather than the sidewalk. Just make sure there's no like patches of glass, or parking in the winter is like horrible because that's where they dump the snow, is on the sidewalk. So going to the Moosehead games, for example, in front of Scotiabank Center, there's a ramp, but then people dump the snow. So I just wanted to ask, like, well, what are they gonna do in the winter, like, and when those spaces are blocked with snow?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee member, some of those things that you talked about, the obstructions where you would get out on the curbside and there would be a tree, or there would be a bench, or there would be a mud puddle. Those are the exact scenarios that these guidelines are trying to help avoid, so that when we do decide, okay, this is where the accessible space is going to go on this block, we don't have somebody come in and put a bench next to it, or come in and plant a tree next to it. So by setting what the entire curb space should look like beside the parking space, that will help us avoid those scenarios. That's also what we're going to do with the audit that we plan on doing through the rest of 2021, is to go around to all of the spaces that are there now and either move those obstructions or move the parking spaces. So if it's a bench, we can move the bench down the block. If it's a tree, can't move the tree, but maybe I can move the space.
Yeah.
And then also these accessible spaces should have priority for snow clearing as well. So the idea is that once they're installed, they can be prioritized so that the ramp isn't full of snow when you get
Okay.
into it.
And how many of these spaces are going to be implemented?
So I think last count, there were about 170 spaces in our area. They don't all look like the ones in the design right now. Like I said, they're
No.
collect things we've collected over the years, but ideally all of those would be brought up to standard. Maybe not to perfect standard, but to the point where they are safe for people to use and aren't going to be unloading into an obstruction or into a traffic lane or something like that.
Will there be a map of where these spaces are?
Yeah, so there's currently a map available. I can.
Jeff, Chair, through you to committee, I just pasted the link to the accessible parking information page on our website, and it has an interactive map that has all of the information associated with each existing accessible parking space through our GIS inventory.
Okay. And I could visualize the first scenario, but not the second one. Like, can you give an example of what the second scenario would be?
So right now, through Mr. Chair, the committee member, right now, that second scenario is just in our imaginations.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say.
They don't exist anywhere in the city yet. That's like the gold standard. That's the best practice based on our research, and where there is room to do that and to have the hard surface lay-by at street level to allow for safe barrier-free loading. We would like to have that at every space, but knowing the constraints that we have for right-of-way width and things like that, it's going to be difficult to put one of those in to existing streets in downtown Halifax. But maybe in a new development where there's a commercial district being built, that's a place that we can look at putting those in and putting in the lay-by area.
Yeah.
But as of right now, none of those exist here. And honestly, it was difficult to find anyone that had successfully implemented one on street in any jurisdiction. So it's the ideal, but there are challenges to get them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Rochelle, do you have any questions?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. This is information I have been wondering for a while, so it was exciting to get to hear. I do have two questions. Yeah, I think they're questions. Yeah, so I guess the first question is actually in relation to some of the things some other folks have talked about. Yeah, so I use accessible parking spaces, and I also use the interactive map fairly regularly to try to figure out where to park where I'm going. I have found that it's not always accurate. Sometimes I end up like driving around trying to look for stuff, or like a construction project will essentially make the parking spot not exist anymore. Actually, and both of my questions are sort of related to each other. So I will ask them at the same time, and then feel free to just answer however. The first is, how often is the list or like the interactive map updated? And are there sort of like standards or best practices in place for when construction projects come up and remove a space? Is there an expectation for them to be like set up somewhere else, somewhere close by, or is it just like until somebody calls, it just gets removed completely? Those are my two sort of related questions.
through you, Chair, to the committee member. We have found that the interactive map is not as accurate as we'd like it to be. That is going to be part of our audit this summer. As we go through to each space, we will update the GIS location to make sure that it is exactly where we say it's going to be. Some get slid up and down the block and then the right people aren't notified, or they get taken out for various reasons. And so ideally we get it to, by the end of this year, an exact picture of what's out there, and we have new processes in place to help us move those along. We can manage the asset internally at Parking Services, so if we move one, it doesn't require a ticket and to go through the process to get moved. We can do it ourselves. We can drag it, or we can remove it. So hopefully that part, well, it's going to take us a couple of months to get it cleaned up, will be better going forward. Your second question about best practices for accessible spaces for construction. Anytime a space is impacted for construction process, the accessible spaces specifically, we will look at, if at all possible, leaving it safely open. If that's not possible, we'll look at one of two options. One is if there's another space nearby, then through the public service announcement that goes out, we'll say this space is closed, but there's another one just around the corner on this block, or just the next block over, provided that space is still a reasonable space for the destinations that would have been served by the space that's lost. If it's not, we'll look for the nearest location that is, and we'll temporarily designate that as an accessible spot. So that's been the practice a little more rigorously over the last year of construction. We've tried to make sure that those spaces are either supplemented nearby or replaced temporarily, or in some cases replaced permanently, where we just recognize there's a space that's more suitable nearby. We'll move it and leave it. So, but it is part of the process for all of our ongoing construction to review the accessible spaces specifically and make sure that the inventory remains as close as possible.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jackie, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. And I guess I just go to where the rubber hits the road, and it may be inappropriate at this point, but I'm wondering about enforcement. Maybe that's working for government. That's how I think. I have had opportunity to have to use accessible parking. It's been mainly for somebody with me. And there's been times, especially off Spring Garden Road, that people are there just for a minute because they're doing delivery, or just for a minute because they're running into the bank, or just for a moment because. So, and this may not be your whole area, Jeff, but I guess it's very difficult. You very seldom see somebody on the street to be able to say somebody needs a parking spot. So I'm wondering again about the enforcement end. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you to committee, I'll take this one since enforcement is not Jeff's responsibility, and he's probably very happy about that. Thank you, Chair, for your question. So we have ramped up our enforcement complement significantly over the last 2 years, and in particular in response to feedback around lack of enforcement for accessible spaces. I don't have the stat in front of me at this moment, but I'm happy to circulate it after the fact. We were recently just asked to provide stats on year-over-year accessible parking enforcement, and I can say with certainty that tickets have increased, especially in the Spring Garden area, as you mentioned, for abuse of accessible parking spaces. As my team knows, I have a pretty 0 to negative tolerance for those that are just running in for a minute. We've really changed our approach in enforcement and have moved away, period, from education and moved to enforcement, ticketing, and towing. So in fact, in the last year, we've implemented the 3-strike rule. So if someone has received 3 tickets for an accessible parking infraction, they get towed automatically. No warning, no ticket, they just get towed. So we have taken a much more proactive, much more enforcement-laden approach when it comes to accessible parking. We've taken a broader educational approach to the rest of our enforcement complement, but I felt quite strongly after the feedback we received in 2019 that residents just weren't getting the message, they weren't caring, and so we needed to do something about it. And then the other component to that as well, in 2019, Regional Council actually directed staff to ask the province to increase their fines for accessible parking. So we have done that. We have sent our formal request now on 2 different occasions. That is happening as part of the that's part of the transportation standing, the Traffic Safety Act review. And so we have requested that officially now on 2 different occasions of the province, and we have been told that their response is forthcoming. So we are hopeful that they will remain a proactive partner with us and understand the value of increasing that fine as well, which we believe will be yet another deterrent for people to choose to abuse those spaces.
Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Have either of the councillors appeared? I don't believe so, but
No, Mr. Chair, they have
Okay.
not.
okay, then I guess I'm next. And I have none. Thank you very much, Jeff and Victoria, for your presentation.
Mr. Chair, it's Darren
Yes,
Young.
certainly.
Do you mind if I have a couple of comments?
Certainly. You want to go?
Turn on my video here. Maybe it won't let me turn it on. Okay, for some reason all right, doesn't want to turn on my video. I don't know why. I apologize. Anyhow, I apologize, but a couple of questions for Jeff and Victoria. The 2 images you showed very much matched figures 68 and 72 from the CSA B651, the built environment. I just wanted to verify that I understood you correctly on your presentation, Jeff, that you were looking both of them as parking spots, because in the B651, one is actually a pickup area, the other one is a parking lot. And I guess my 2 questions are: confirm that you're both planning to be parking spots, and 2, why would you not maybe look at referencing the B651 if your images are that close, so that when the B651 updates with the latest changes from CSA, that your policy would automatically update and you wouldn't have to go back and redo it. You would just reference the B651. That's question 1. And question 2 was, did you guys look at limited mobility parking at all as an option for those that, maybe have had recent knee surgery or have issues walking any large distance? They don't need more space, but they do need a place close to the door, close to their activity. And so it's something we're starting to do at community centers, and I'm wondering if you guys looked at that at all for on-street parking. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, there were a couple of reasons that we looked at. The question about the CSA standard, that particularly references or excludes on-street parking and references off-street parking specifically. So as we looked at that, what was developed by our planning and design group and our parking analysts with those standards in mind, it was really we didn't want to adopt or to reference the standard exactly, as we felt the standard applied more to off-street parking, and that this was specifically for on-street. For your second question regarding the limited mobility, the idea with these spaces is that they would be appropriate parking spaces for anyone using on-street parking with any type of permits. So we want to make sure that if we put in a space that's marked as accessible, that it is appropriate for the largest collection of users that it can be. So, and unlike an off-street lot that may serve one facility, these off-street spaces may serve a neighborhood. So to put a limited mobility space directly in front of one business may not help the business a few doors down, because then, you know, somebody parking there, unless they're going to that one business, wouldn't be able to make use of it. They'd be better off parking in a regular spot on the street.
Okay, actually figure 72 actually does refer to both. It's basically parallel parking regardless if it's on street or in a parking or in a parking lot. So that would be an appropriate on street. And the diagram you have is almost identical. I think maybe there was one number difference. So it'd be something to look at to make things cleaner on a go forward basis. And then of course that's going to dovetail back into the recommendations coming out of the built environment from the province. And so making sure we had enough room for, I think you did comment on snow removal and ice removal for those areas. So those are all making sure we have adequate space for the movement of that. And so it's good. I appreciate that. And it was a great presentation. Thanks, Jeff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, we'll certainly take a look at that as we polish these up for publishing.
Great. Liz, you have a question? Your arm is waving.
Yes, actually, I had a question for Jeff.
Go ahead.
So I had a few things that I was curious about the paying for the parking, for accessible parking. I would have a problem with that. I went to the dentist at the professional center and I did park there, and it wasn't clear on if I was supposed to be paying for that or not paying for that where I was parked in that space. The sun was shining on what I was trying to look at, so I couldn't figure out if I was supposed to be parking or not. And my car was actually quite a ways away from the pay station as well. So I'd have to walk all the way to the pay station and then get the little ticket and then walk all the way back to my car and put it in my car. So I think it'd be easier if those spots were more central, and also if it'd be more clear to know when you're in the accessible parking spots, if you need to go over and use that pay station or not, so you don't have people walking back and forth. And then also I'm wondering, Jeff, are you the one that you would speak to about maybe having a parking meter there if the parking was required, or am I getting a little bit off topic here? And I had one other thing about parking as well. Just gonna fix my screen here a little bit. On the narrow streetways, it certainly isn't easy to park on those narrow streetways. If anyone has a child or you know, anything like that, particularly on Queen Street or South Park Street. I live on South Park, and I know that one is quite narrow, and I find that really challenging to park anywhere along the street on that area. We can't make the street less narrow, I suppose, but those are some questions, concerns that I have, whether it's for Jeff or not. I'm really sure. So, and also that would be for accessible parking, and also just, I guess, that sort of minimum movement or that sort of need of mobility issue.
Chair, through you to the committee member, I can take the first section of the question pertaining to paid parking and accessible parking. So we do not charge for paid parking at accessible parking spaces. The signs on the peninsula are all marked at an hourly designation. So some accessible parking spaces are 2 hours, some are 3, some have no limit in residential areas. So those are the only restraints associated with those accessible parking spaces. However, the committee members' feedback is warranted around the location of the parking pay stations. When we looked at the placement of those pay stations, we considered accessibility criteria, working with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So we wanted to ensure things like that the pay station was not on a hill, that it was easily accessible, both for those with mobility issues, but also those with a cane, etc. We also have high contrast on the screen so that they're more easily visible for those with issues around sight concerns. So there's a number of items that we've taken into account into the placement and location. However, if residents have specific, or if committee members have specific feedback about the location of any pay station, we're happy to review that again and look at an alternate location. The other thing is it's not a pay and display system, it's a pay and walk away system. So once you've registered your plate, you do not have to return to your vehicle. So it doesn't matter where you've parked. You can find the closest pay station to your destination, register your parking session, and continue on with your day. But again, just to close, there is no need to pay at an accessible parking space.
Yeah,
and Jeff,
Dad
sorry.
actually gave me a ticket and it told me to take the ticket back and put it in my car. So I was really unsure, so I just didn't bother. I just went back to my car. And you know, I didn't want to just ignore it and not pay for it. So,
of course.
you know, and if the meter lady had shown up and I hadn't taken care of that, then that would have been, you know, disastrous. I would have ended up with a ticket. So it was lucky that I just went back and got in my car. So it was a close call.
Again, through you, Chair, to the committee member, I apologize for that confusion. The machine should not be directing you to display a ticket. We'll certainly look into that incident. Perhaps we can follow up with you offline to get the specifics about your experience.
Okay, sure. And who am I talking to? Will somebody just send me an email or? I'm not
Sure. I can work with the clerk's office to get your email if that works, and I'll send you a note after this meeting.
Okay, great.
Perfect. And Jeff, are you able to address the other question about narrow streets?
Yeah, so unfortunately, downtown Halifax was designed for horses and not cars. So we are stuck with some narrow right of way. So that's part of the work that my group does every day. It's to make sure that the parking is installed in a way that is
I think
safe
it's
to
the
use.
sidewalks that have really made it more narrow, and the bike lane as well that's made that more narrow in my area specifically. You know, I think it was great for the cyclists, but not great for the width of the street for the drivers. You know, I live right there close to Spring Garden. I'm on South Park. That's why I know.
Yeah, and those are definitely challenges through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee member. Those are definitely challenges that we face going forward, is making sure that the limited right-of-way use that we have can be used to fulfill those requirements that council has put before us. So the integrated mobility plan does call for an improved pedestrian realm and new active transportation bikeways, stuff like that. So it's a tricky balance to try and assign the right amount of space to everyone. So the amount that does get allocated to parking, my group looks at making it as efficient, as easy to use, as safe as it can be, both for accessible parking and for people who would just use a conventional parking space to make sure that it's safe, easy, convenient as much as possible.
Okay, have we answered that?
Oh, yes, sorry, we were just switching interpreters.
Yeah, all right. Okay, that was it for questions on my list. So Jeff, Victoria, thank you for your presentation. And we will move on.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, now we are going to work on the work plan. So before we do that, I believe Annie has to share her screen. And we also need a motion. So Annie, will you share your screen? And I will ask for the motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I've potentially had a bit of change of heart in terms of how this should be displayed potentially. So I think potentially what would be the best path forward would be if there are the work plan was circulated with the agenda package earlier last week. It was circulated last week. So I think potentially what the best thing to do would be if there are any amendments that folks would like to make, I can put the work plan up on the screen and make those changes in real time. But aside from that, folks have received the work plan ahead of time. But I will post the motion pertaining to the work plan in the group chat right now.
Okay, does that work? I think if we will make that work. Yes, okay. So the motion is that the Accessibility Advisory Committee recommend to the Executive Standing Committee to approve the Advisory Committee 2021 work plan. So I need a seconder and a mover for that, please. A mover and a seconder.
Rochelle, I can move that
Thank you,
or
Rochelle.
move to accept. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle.
I'll second that.
And that was Liz through the interpreter, was it?
Yes, sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
excellent. Thank you. So all in favor? Or do we need to ask a question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think potentially this could be an opportunity for discussion, for questions of clarification that any members
Yes,
may have,
yes.
any amendments, and then when members are content with the work plan, then the approval can be officially moved if
Yeah,
that's all
I
right.
got ahead of myself on our agenda. All right, thank you.
All
Thank
good,
you,
no
Dana.
worries.
Okay, so discussions. Let's go with is Sam here? I thought maybe I saw her come in late. No, I imagined it. Okay. My agenda. Leslie, do you have anything about the work plan to talk about?
Mr. Chair, not at this time.
Okay, Leslie. Oh, that was Leslie. Asia, sorry, Asia.
Mr. Chair, I don't think that Asia's microphone is working. I think
Okay,
they might type in the chat.
Yeah, that's what I'll be looking for. Asia, if you are typing into the chat, I'll keep looking and come back if I see it appear. Okay. Nicole, do you have anything on work plan?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Rochelle, do you have anything?
No, not right now. Thank you.
Jackie, do you have anything on the work plan to discuss?
No, not at this point, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Liz, do you have anything?
You mean me? This is Liz.
Yes.
You mean me? No, I don't actually. No.
No? Okay. Councillor Deagle, has she arrived yet? No. No.
No,
Okay.
she is not, Mr. Chair, nor has Councillor Russell.
Okay, so, and I have nothing to add to the work plan, so now we do that. Okay, call for the question. We have a seconder and a mover. So all in favor of asking the Executive Standing Committee to approve, say yay or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Excellent. Now we move on to the annual town hall discussion. Annie, can you talk about our previous meetings and what happens with those?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. First of all, just want to say thank you and congratulations on passing your work plans. It's very exciting, and this is kind of the base from which we'll build the work for the rest of the year through this committee. So very exciting. A part of the work plan that was just passed along to the Executive Standing Committee was the town hall. What I kind of just wanted to do today was kind of set the stage for the way that town halls have taken place in the past, and perhaps get a little bit more clarification on some questions that I have around venue, so that I can start having those conversations with potential venues and bring that information back to the committee so that we can start kind of imagining the space, whether it be virtual, in person, or both, for the annual town hall. Just wanted to give an overview of the last town hall, and wanted to note that the agenda and minutes for the town hall are on the HRM website. And if folks would like to, take a look at that after the committee, but I'll kind of provide an overview of what took place. The last town hall took place on November 19th in 2019. And there was approximately about a $1,500 budget for that town hall. That number is kind of what will be maintained for the town hall that the committee will put on in the coming year. And the breakdown for that budget was largely, split pretty evenly between facility rental, cart captioning services, as well as having ASL interpretation at the meeting, as well as like staff support. And then there were some pieces around refreshments. The last town hall was hosted in the multipurpose room of the Cole Harbor Place. And kind of the structure of the event has been quite standard over the past few years that town halls have taken place. So generally there's open remarks, and then it will move into a staff overview of kind of broad accessibility successes and challenges that business units within the Halifax Regional Municipality are experiencing. At the last town hall, there was representatives from Diversity Inclusion. Our accessibility advisor, Melissa Myers, was there, through kind of customer service and corporate and customer service through the corporate facility design and construction. And Darren Young was there to present on that matter. Halifax Transit was there, planning and development. We have transportation and public works, parks and recreation. So there was a broad representation of business units present to speak largely to the theme of accessibility challenges and successes throughout each of the business units. So after the presentations from each of the respective business units, there was an opportunity for public feedback, and folks could, take to the floor. In this case, it was physically to ask questions, and each person was limited to kind of, 3 minutes for their questions, and then to get the feedback from the respective staff member that they were speaking to or interested in learning more about. And then following the town hall, which was just shy of about 2 hours in total, all of the information that was shared at the meeting was then put together in a recommendation kind of report and passed along to the Executive Standing Committee. So that is kind of, the how it has been done in the past. That is the kind of structure that I have seen over the past few years when town halls have took place as well. So I guess just wanted to, kind of provide that overview so we could at least, see what we were working towards. I think we've been talking about the town hall and kind of more of like an idea at large. And I just thought that it might be nice to kind of bring it down and provide the examples of how it has functioned in the past. And then the next piece that I just wanted to touch base on with the committee was around the venue options. So within the work plan and like at the discussions that we've had, there is certainly like an interest expressed around engaging the libraries. And if there was an interest in doing a split between like virtual and in-person sessions, that perhaps potentially various libraries could host the event throughout the HRM and potentially live stream that and, facilitate questions of that nature. So I guess in terms of, a little bit of direction that I'm looking for from the committee, would certainly be, is there a desire to have staff start having conversations with the library around what the logistics would look like for hosting that space and kind of what those locations could look like. And I will, I will take what the committee provides in terms of direction, and I will go forward with that and come back with some information at the next meeting. So I realize that I just kind of, put a lot out there, and I'm happy to answer any questions of clarification, but certainly would appreciate some direction on seeking for venues, but also recognize that if there are some questions that I am unable to answer or things that the committee is interested in learning more from folks who were there. We do have some folks on the meeting with us who were there for previous town halls. So yeah, that's my piece, and I will be happy to answer any additional questions, or at least try to, and then follow up with the committee at the next meeting around venues in particular.
Okay, so here we are with our question order. Leslie, would you lead us off if you have any questions or comments?
Thank you very much. I think that the only red flag that came up in my mind as we were discussing this is those who are immune compromised, and what is our responsibility to ensure everyone's safety. I do recognize that there are precautions put in place, but just something to think about if we moved into a physical space.
Thank you for that. Through you, Chair. I'm writing that down, and absolutely agree that is a priority across the board. I think the intent around date, I believe it has generally taken place in in the fall. So an October or November date, hopefully we'll have a high subsection of the population with both vaccines, and we'll be in a good spot then. But absolutely, we do have some time to play with, like, even though there are a lot of variables still kind of moving around with the pandemic. But absolutely take your point. Thank you.
Great. Okay, I've not seen anything from Asia. Asia, are you present?
Chair, I believe Asia has left the meeting. I did reach out by email,
Okay,
but I haven't heard back.
well, we will come back if they show up. So, Nicole, do you have anything to add to this discussion?
I was just wondering, like, once we start meeting in person again, I don't know when that will be. glad to hear that there's still cases reported today, but just wondering once we start being in public again, in person, is there an option for people that are immune compromised and still not 100% comfortable to go in person? Will there be a option to still do virtual Zoom to join?
And through you, Mr. Chair, just is this question particular to the Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting space or the town hall specifically?
Both, I guess.
Okay, fair. Thank you for your question, and through you, Chair. I anticipate that sorry, I'm like, I have two streams of thought going on at once right now, so attempting I'll address them one at a time.
Yes.
So the first piece around this committee in particular being able to meet virtually versus, in person, a little bit maybe ahead of where we're at right now in terms of, thinking about, like what meeting spaces will look like in the future. But the province has passed legislation to provide for virtual meeting spaces for the Halifax Regional Municipality and all of the advisory committees, boards, everything that falls under the umbrella of Regional Council.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we do, that's a tool that we absolutely have in our back pocket. And certainly I think a conversation that the committee can have all together once we kind of get to the point where things could be opening up and we could, think about, starting in-person meetings again. I think, that would ultimately end up being a conversation at the discretion of the chair, but also at the direction of the CAO. So a lot of moving pieces there for sure. But then around the annual town hall, I think what I think I have heard from the committee so far is that there would be a desire to potentially have a hybrid model so that we want to ensure that this is a space that is accessible in every facet of the word. So with that in mind, I will certainly make sure to prioritize the ability for a virtual space if there is also the desire to have it in an in-person setting in one way or the other.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Liz with a question, so I'm going to jump ahead in my speakers list. Liz, go ahead.
This is Liz. So I do support the idea of the hybrid idea of having the in-person and the online. I think that's great. Sometimes it's just too hard for someone to have to get all their stuff together and then go to a meeting. Sometimes it's the disability issues. So I think we might even get more people if we have both of those options, the in-person and the online. I think that would be wonderful. That was all the comments I had on that point. So I think that was great. I love the hybrid idea. Sorry, and you were saying that you were thinking of having these at the Halifax Library. Is that what I heard earlier, or was I mistaken?
Thank you so much for the question. Through you, Chair. The Halifax Central Library is certainly an option, but also all of the libraries are connected through a chain through funding and stuff as well. So I'm sure if we approach the libraries at large to have a conversation around where these could take place, potentially we could have a viewing at the library. And is there one in Middle Musquodoboit or is it in Musquodoboit proper?
There's one in the harbor, yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So, there are certainly a lot of libraries that are all kind of connected. So I'm sure that we could approach the conversation with, trying to make sure that they're spread throughout the municipality.
Okay, does that address your questions, Liz?
Me? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is Liz, sorry. Yes, I was just curious on what that was going to look like going forward. So that has answered my question. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay, Rochelle, do you have anything you'd like to ask or add?
Yeah, I think I'll just reiterate what a few other folks have said, because this is something I feel very strongly about, along the lines of having like every future meeting be some sort of hybrid model. I think like one of the sort of nice things that came from COVID is this lovely attention to like what access looks like and how that might look different for like in a lot of different ways. And I've been really excited with how access has changed over the last sort of year and a bit. So I would, yeah, love to see this sort of hybrid style model meeting situation continue into like the future more generally. But yeah, especially if we're planning like a very soon future town hall. I just am very on board with the hybrid model of meetings. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. I think I have an incomplete list because Jackie is not on it. But Jackie, do you have anything?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair, of course. I guess I just want to throw out, again, I'm certainly supportive of the hybrid, but I think specifically to the town hall meeting, it's vital that we include the libraries. HRM runs from Hubbard's to Sheet Harbor. So they've got a library in Sheet Harbor, I know that. They also have in Sheet Harbor the Gerald Harding Society, which is an adult service center for individuals with disabilities. So you do have a population in that area that may be very interested. In addition to that, I had mentioned last time I was considering possibly the counselors on their notices or Facebook or whatever their social media is, that they could advertise it. And I was informed at the time it's been very difficult for some of the counselors to have that sort of communication and connect with their constituents. But also I think the libraries are very, very good at advertising. So I think they would be, again, vital in terms of advertising and getting the word out there. Thank you, Mr. Chair, that's it.
Thank you. And if I may, Mr. Chair, through you, just wanted to say that, from some of the documents that I've seen in terms of how this has been advertised in the past, I think that there would absolutely be the opportunity for the municipal clerk's office to work with the council coordinator's office to see if we can, get it advertised in the newsletters that the councilors put out. I think often this has kind of been a bit more of a discussion from what I've seen a bit closer to the actual date of the town hall. But, there is certainly a very wide and connected network that we can explore to make sure that this is communicated to the public effectively.
Great. Are you satisfied with that, Jackie? Are you finished?
That's great. Thank you very much.
All right, excellent. Back to my list. I believe I am through it because the counselors are not here. My only comment would be the challenge of snow, which on the first day of summer, I don't want to talk about. But I have a very strict, if it's snowing, I'm not going policy. So again, the hybrid model would be ideal because literally, if it's snowing, I really won't go, even if it's just a respite. So yes, a hybrid would be wonderful. And this might not be accessibility in the broader sense, but last time I was there, there was a small group of Arabic speakers who had an interpreter with them. And I'm wondering Is that something that we can kind of get on board with and throw our support behind? Making sure that not only ASL, but uh, other languages are supported?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can absolutely look into what that would look like from like a budgeting perspective,
Yeah.
and bring that back to the committee so that everyone is working with the same information. But absolutely, but we recognize that this is an incredibly multicultural space, and English is not everyone's first language, and access on that front should certainly be prioritized as well. And I see a hand from Tracy, so I will.
Yes, Tracy has weighed in on this. So, Tracy,
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Yes, so what has happened in the past is we've also reached out to ISANS to ensure persons with disability who are representative of the immigrant community know about the event, and we work with them to ensure if they're participating that there is interpretation. And in the past, our office has helped to support. I think we paid small honorariums for them to have interpretations provided. So should we look to do that, our office would work to help set up the town hall, and should that be a need, then our office would again support that, and it is part of inclusion and accessibility. So yes, thank you.
great. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Annie, for that concurrent answer. Okay. All right, here we go. Staff update. Melissa will be here to talk about the accessibility strategy. So, Melissa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to see everyone this evening. So I just want to give everyone a quick little update on the accessibility strategy. So I'm pleased to announce that the accessibility strategy went to council on May 18th, and the regional council has unanimously approved the accessibility strategy moving forward. So that is great news. So our office will be working to support all the business units in completing the 30 recommendations that are outlined in that strategy for the next 9 years. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, that's great to hear that they've done that and it was unanimous. I love unanimity on that kind of thing. Makes great sense. Okay, do we have questions, or was there anything that required discussion on that? No? Okay. I see a lot of shaking heads, so I will interpret that as no. Do we have any items that were added to the order of business? Any, I don't think we did, but.
Nope. Yes, Mr. Chair, we the agenda is the same as it was at the beginning of the meeting, so we're all good.
All right. So the next meeting will be July 19th. Does that work for everyone? July 19th, that is, let me just get my calendar up here. And that is also a Monday, of course.
And this this is Elizabeth. So that's July 19th again. Is that what you said?
July 19th, Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock.
I might not be able to attend because that's my sister's birthday, but I'll keep you updated.
All right, we'll keep that in mind. Any other large conflicts? Other than the fact that it is July?
No, this is Liz. It works for me.
All right, great. So our next meeting is July 19th.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
So sorry. I just wanted to, I know that the summer meetings are often if required, but I just wanted to advise the committee that we are likely to have a presentation regarding the regional plan review coming to the July 19th meeting. So I just wanted to advise members of the committee that the July 19th meeting is going to be going ahead. There would of course be flexibility around the specific date if that didn't work for a lot of folks, but the review team is looking forward to having a consultation with the committee.
okay, well, we will hopefully certainly keep that in mind, but I will be here. So I hope you're going to join me. Okay, I need a mover for adjournment. Who do I have?
I'll move.
All right, thank you, Nicole. Motion to adjourn has been requested, so I will see you all on July 19th. And we will call